This is Christina Caudill, a member of the Dream Team of the New Paradigm community. And thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you some insights as we come to the time of Jupiter trine Neptune. And we've been speaking a lot in the community about Jupiter in Scorpio. And so this is one of the first major aspects that we're looking at with Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of the occult, and Jupiter being the truth seeker, Jupiter expanding that which it touches. And most of us have been very observant of these different changes, of the major shifts of Jupiter entering Scorpio, or we can't ignore it actually, because there's so much coming out with, the truth seeker of of Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio, who wants to keep secrets. With Scorpio, we like to think of it as the secrets sort of in the basement, or that part of life that maybe we've never fully investigated. And so we sort of keep some of this shame, some of this darkness and shadow hidden. And as Jupiter has come along, which has been very recently, since October, then we've seen sort of the genie out of the bottle, right? When it comes to things like, for instance, the Me Too campaign, where women all over were sharing about their sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and, really finding it as a watershed moment, Scorpio being a water sign, of this pain and this shame that the feminine has been carrying on its own, carrying in secret. And then now we see that this whole sexual harassment and all these powerful men behaving badly is kind of an epidemic. It's an epidemic all over the world, not just in the United States. We've also been seeing a lot of stories around pedophilia, which now that the North Node is in Leo, Leo is a sign of the child. So there are a lot of stories coming out about children and childhood. And with Jupiter and Scorpio bringing out the dark side, the stuff that we don't want to see. No one ever wants to think about children being abused sexually or otherwise. And we're seeing sort of the release of this darkness. But as we know, the only way that we can clean out that which is not helpful, not toward growth, not toward healing, is we have to take a look at it, and we have to name, the accuser and the abuser, and name the elephant in the room, right? And as Jupiter being the big elephant walking into the room of Scorpio, we've had to face a lot of this dark material. And I think what's really beautiful about our community is we are not afraid to talk about some of these things that most people don't want to talk about. And it's because astrology can help us to see the bigger picture. We can see it from the meta view of we're all in this together. We're all part of the problem, but we can also be part of the solution, because what one person does has a ripple effect. And we are all, in some ways, part of the collective, right? And so when we take that on, that, it's my responsibility to do my part. It's not my responsibility to save everyone. And we have to keep that in mind, because with Neptune in its sign of Pisces, there is that sort of savior element, or that feeling overwhelmed, like, gosh, I can't save everybody. I'm stretched too thin. I can do there's only so much I can do. Now, when we have these planets in aspect to one another, Jupiter trining Neptune, that can give us a real heightened sense of our intuition and that which is beyond the material. And isn't it interesting that we'll have Jupiter trine Neptune, which the first exact trine will be December 2nd and 3rd, at the same time that Saturn is entering Capricorn, right? The Earth, the ultimate Earth sign, the ultimate sign of being in the here and now in this human experience on planet Earth, right? The ultimate sign of materialism. And we have this magical aspect between these two planets. Jupiter, which is about the spirit and expansion and freedom. You know, it's about our beliefs. We traditionally see it as religion, which it could have, you know, it could also, we could see what religion has to do with our belief system, you know, for better or for worse. Where has it inspired us? And where has it led us to fanaticism? So with Jupiter trining the spiritual sign of or the spiritual planet of Neptune in its own sign of Pisces, which is the ultimate oneness consciousness. Here we have, you know, a real flow of energy, a supporting flow. This is an opening trine where these planets support one another, and Jupiter tends to take on that which it aspects, you know, the sign it's in and that which it aspects. So we'll see sort of Jupiter giving a lot more flow, just flooding that Neptune, opening the floodgates of Neptune. Neptune, as we know, controls, well, I don't know, controls, but helps inspire our dreams. I know that when there's a lot of Neptune activity, then that's like with the planets, maybe hard aspects and things like that, dreams are just, it's like almost hard to tell dream life from waking life, right? We wake up still dreaming, you know, or we think about the dream we had last night and think, was that yesterday or was that a dream I had? You know, our dreams can be vivid. They can really, and we can be so caught up in them. And then when we wake up, our conscious, the mind at the conscious level, the mind at sort of the material level, might not be able to make full sense of, you know, all that which came through our dreams. But there is some urgency there for our subconscious to come through into our daily life. You know, we can just pay attention to what is coming through, what's flowing through us. You know, as Carl Jung said, the soul wants to live through us. You know, the soul has a life of its own, and the soul wants to express that life through us. You know, so we are the ultimate vessel and channel of the soul. And now someone asked me the other day about trines and said, are trines, aren't they, what did they call it? Well, basically they thought benign. They said, aren't trines like a benign aspect? You know, it really, we look a lot at hard aspects in astrology. We talk a lot about them because they're usually the most noticeable. There's usually a sense of urgency, or, you know, we want to change things or fix things, or we see, you know, we will maybe see or notice things in the world or in our own emotional life when it comes to things like squares and oppositions and inconjuncts. But when we think about trines, they can be more subtle. And when it comes to something like Neptune and Pisces, which is flowy, and then we have Jupiter, which expands things, and it's in this, you know, that fixed water sign of Scorpio, giving it that juice, giving more juice to the magic and mysticism of Neptune. I think this is something that we can really, if we're really attuned to what's going on, we're attuned to the potential of, again, the magic of this period. It can be a very creative and spiritual period. But what we want to sort of watch out for, if there is something to sort of want to be conscious of, would be the anesthetizing of Neptune and Pisces. And I can speak to this because I'm in my Neptune square, right? So those of us in our early 40s, it tends to be when Neptune squares our natal Neptune. And so that can be either a very creative period, very much about spirituality and seeing, you know, the bigger picture, the higher level of enlightenment at work in your life, in the world. Or we can let it, the sense of maybe disillusionment, take over. Neptune is the planet of fantasy, illusion, as well as disillusionment, right? It can help us to dream big in a way where we can feel like we're, you know, beyond the clouds, which is necessary for us to have inspiration in our lives. And that's a necessary element of creativity. But we can also feel, you know, disillusioned that this 3D world sometimes doesn't support that level of creativity, that level of intuition and enlightenment. So there is that ability with this Jupiter trine Neptune to still have Jupiterian faith in the Neptunian experience of spirit. You know, this is a wonderful time to be creating some kind of talisman, maybe a talisman to keep you in that space of letting spirit guide your thoughts, your actions, your words. You know, let spirit be speaking through you. And so now it's interesting that when we look at these planets and how they've been interacting with each other through this cycle, because remember, when these planets, when we talk about two planets aspecting each other, it's always part of a cycle. And, you know, we like to look at the new moon cycle, the conjunction, and the opposition, which is similar to a full moon of two planets, you know, when we think of the sun and the moon. But let's take a look. Let me see if I can share my screen. And oops, there's my notes. So yes, this was the beginning of this cycle of Neptune conjunct. Oops, what happened? Oh no, I lost it. It was, why can't I go back? Uh-oh. Okay, so that was December 21, 2009. Sorry. May, June, 2009. Okay, so December 21, 2009. So that was when Neptune conjunct Jupiter. And that was in Aquarius, right? Now that is the sign of the collective, the sign of, you know, it's not about me. It's about the bigger picture with involving humanity, involving others. Here we have Chiron and the moon. And we have an opposition with Mars and Leo. Now, there's several interesting things about this. And obviously here we have a yod. And so what we're looking at here is the beginning of this cycle. So it's almost like, you know, when you look at a birth chart, you know, where were all the planets in the star, in the sky at that moment? And I don't have the exact time here, but I know that the moon was right in there. And the moon being the sign of, you know, women, the feminine. And, you know, this being actually what happened in December 2009 was the beginning. Well, I don't know about December, but I know that year was what was called fourth wave feminism, where there was a lot of talk about feminism taking place online. And so if you look up fourth wave feminism, then you'll see that, you know, if you look at this, I mean, online, you know, the internet, that's very Aquarian sort of activity. And Chiron being about the wounds, you know, Chiron, the moon, the wounds are the feminine. Jupiter and Neptune, you know, Neptune just releases the floodgates. Neptune is when, you know, boundaries are dissolved. and Jupiter, even expanding things even more. Now, what happened right at about that time, news-wise, was a few things. Sarah Palin, those of you in America, she released her book called Going Rogue. So if anything, going rogue, is very Aquarian, right? And when we look at, all of this Aquarian energy opposite Mars, right? And in a yod with, the North Node and Mercury, as well as Uranus, pressurizing that Mars in Leo, that male dominance, that male obnoxiousness, right? Now, this isn't to insult every male there, because, we know that we have some wonderful men in this community, but this is just that, that Martian urge to dominate, to be all about me. And this being about the collective saying, there's wounds that need healing here. And it's really interesting because when you look at what's happening today, now this is where the North Node of the moon is, right? 18 and 19, Leo. And we're seeing such a rise in feminism, such a rise of the feminine wounds, and also with trans people as well, them coming out and arising and saying, we are, we're people too, we're meant to be respected. We need to change the dialogue around how we fit into society and who we are as people, and, we've had some trans people just now. As a trans woman just became the first elected official in Virginia. So I don't know if she's first elected official, but first elected at like the state level or something, a major breakthrough, right? And so this is sort of like, the birth moment. And then when we go to when the opposition was in 2015, I believe it was September. Oh, the other thing that happened in 2009, before I move on, that was the year that Tiger Woods came out with, all of that, all these women came out like in a parade saying like, yeah, he was my lover and all this stuff. And his whole reputation was destroyed, and so this was also when Pluto just entered Capricorn, right? The sign of the reputation, the sign of the, the upstanding reputation kind of thing. And we saw that this person who had been so squeaky clean was not so squeaky clean anymore. And so that was kind of a shock to people. And so when we look at September, at the sort of the opposition phase of Neptune opposite Jupiter, that was September 2015. And when we look at these, it's a tension point, it's a crisis point. And when we think of belief and religion, one of the big news stories that year, which I actually hadn't heard of until I looked it up, but it was a major news story throughout the world. In Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, there was a huge stampede of pilgrims to make their annual pilgrimage to this holy site. And no one knows exactly what happened. No one knows. It's sort of hidden. The truth is hidden. It's clouded by that Neptune probably. But this huge stampede of 2,000 pilgrims, right? So we have this Jupiter in Virgo, Virgo being the humble people, and Neptune also being about, this runaway train, almost a runaway experience. And so over 2,000 people died. Actually, they think it's more like over 2,400 people died. And so, these are these big events that sort of spread, that have like a far-reaching effect. That was also the time of Pope Francis visiting the United States. And he made a really great impression, apparently, to a lot of people because of his joyousness. He's a very Jupiterian character, Sagittarian, and his humility. That's also very Virgo. So we also want to look at these religious type of experiences. How is religion fueling the sense of fanaticism, or this need to be absolved of our sins, or this need to be to atone for things through religion? And how in our life, as we've adapted, spirituality is something that we hope to help us become better people, or to become more pure of spirit. How are these things operating in our lives, and how can we help them to elevate us, to a greater sense of connection, a greater sense of oneness? And so when we look at, let me just go back to now, 2017. And then when we go to December 2nd, we've got Jupiter in Scorpio here, trine Neptune in Pisces there at about 11 degrees. And so let me see if I can stop my share. And so we can talk a little bit about the trine, right? So when we look at our own lives, we want to think, how can we allow more of this sacredness, this magic, transmuting the dark and the shadow into something that can help to heal? Because ultimately, when we look at like the benefits of Pisces and Neptune, it's healing those rifts, healing those soul wounds, healing that which, affects us throughout potentially many lifetimes. When we look at soul healing, the level of soul, that's the level of that which cannot be destroyed, but there's still healing that can take place, or something that can touch us deeply, and that can make an imprint on our lives and carry us forward so that we can pass that on to others. So let's look at the 11 degrees of these signs of, let's start with Pisces, because we've got Neptune in Pisces. Let's see. So when we do these Sabian symbols, which give us a little bit more insight on what is sort of the movement and the message of the planets and stars, then we're looking at 11 degrees Pisces. But we want to add a degree because it's the 12th degree. So the 12th degree of Pisces. So this is where Neptune has been on and off for, Neptune moves very slowly. So for at least more than a year, like around this degree. It says, in the sanctuary of an occult brotherhood, newly initiated members are being examined and their character tested. Ooh, my goodness. An occult brotherhood. And so the keynote says, the ever repeated challenge presented to the individual by the group in which he has claimed acceptance, the challenge to prove himself and his ability to assume responsibility effectively. That's a long one. That's actually probably one of the longest ones I've read of these Sabian symbols. And it talks about, obviously, how an individual is being tested or even controlled by the collective. And actually, the key word here is about qualification. Where are we no longer free as an individual? And where do we have to step up in order to be accepted by either the secret brotherhood or this, in the Sabian symbol, it speaks in metaphors. Sometimes we see, you know, very much the exact image of the Sabian symbol out there in the world, but we want to sort of open it up a little bit more and look at the metaphor of it. Again, it was in the sanctuary of an occult brotherhood, newly initiated members are being examined and their character tested. You know, so it's kind of like when those Greek, what do they call them? You know, when they put them through those tests in college, and you have to show if you're really committed, and if you're willing to do whatever it takes to be part of this group, this special group, and then somehow it toughens you up, or it takes you out of yourself, out of your known personality, your known limitations. And that's the thing about the occult. Any kind of occult practice is pushing beyond your previous limitations. That's why we call it metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is different than just growth or even transformation. It's like a complete inner and outer change. So isn't that interesting that where Neptune is in Pisces, it has this sort of message here, this little seed of occult practice. And it's also asking us to go beyond our known self in order to have some kind of value, to give, to belong. And this sense of belonging is really coming up a lot in the collective right now. I know Brene Brown wrote her book on belonging. There's a really great book on tribes by Sebastian Junger about belonging. I've seen this word, maybe it's just because I'm, attuned to it, but this word of belonging keeps coming up. And when we think of Neptune and Pisces, we think about the collective, something without boundaries, dissolving boundaries. But at this stage, near the entering the middle, the second decan of Pisces, there is something about wanting to belong, needing to belong to a group or community that can then help us feel like we're safe, right? And so just kind of taking that on and thinking about, what communities do we need? Are we missing? Because the opposite of that is being totally isolated, not being connected to others, not being connected to community. And when we aren't connected, we will find it more difficult to see how we are so interconnected to everything. So let's see. Then we'll look at Scorpio. Scorpio, 11. So it's 11 degrees Scorpio. So we're looking at the 12th degree of Scorpio. Let's see. Here we go. The 12th degree. Oh, yes. An official embassy ball. That one's much shorter, right? An official embassy ball. The keynote, here we have another note about groups. It says group consciousness as it flowers at its highest level in cultural interchanges between representatives of the elite and the ruling class. So let me read that again. Group consciousness as it flowers at the highest level in cultural interchanges between representatives of the elite and the ruling class. And the key word here is about a ritualized display of power, prestige, and wealth. It's a development of rhythmic give and take in order to achieve global peace. Well, let's hope this has something to do with global peace, because as we see the ruling class right now, at least in America, we're seeing a lot of greed, right? We're seeing a lot of it being about preserving the ruling class. So what can we take from this? I mean, in our own lives, we want to see how can we benefit from group consciousness, right? So here we have group consciousness, a cult, pushing ourselves beyond who we know ourselves to be, and also being proud of what we can achieve together, and doing it in a way that helps to further peace, that helps to further something good, something greater than us. So it's very interesting that this first trine here is not just all about me and all about getting more for myself, which you very well could, with all this magic and expansion. To me, I hear abundance and manifestation, and there's so much of this talk in our world, this magic and spiritualization, all for me and all for my healing. But here we have some messages that it needs to go beyond us. We need to start belonging to one another. It makes me think of a couple of years ago, I attended a grief ritual by Sabian Symbols, who is the African grief ritualist. She has since passed, sadly, but she would hold these grief rituals. So she would take the lessons from Africa that they would learn about grief, and she brought them to little retreats around the United States, and I think other countries as well. And the retreats would be like over 200 people, which she said was actually the size of a small African village. And it was necessary to have a lot of people like that. I was used to going to retreats with like maybe 50 people, or 100 maybe. 200 was a lot, especially with something as precious and sacred, I thought, as grief. But in fact, with the 200 people, when we were all in the grief ceremony, and there was a lot of theater around crying and wailing and letting go of your grief, you actually felt like you were in something beyond, your normal state, even beyond yourself. You're in the grief of this timeless grief of humanity that so many of us hold, again, as a little seed. And when it gets released and it flowers among, this whole community, is when we can finally cleanse it, and we can all cleanse together. So whether it is a cleansing of grief, whether it is making magic together, whether it is inspiring one another, there is some real collective energy that we have the potential to tap into. And channeling it toward healing, channeling it toward global peace. What little thing can you and say a group of even 5 other people do to create more peace in the world? I think that would be a beautiful thing and a beautiful way to approach this aspect of Jupiter trine Neptune. Now, there'll be 2 other aspects of Jupiter trine Neptune. Let's see. We have Jupiter. We have May 25th. It's at 16 degrees of Scorpio Pisces. That's when Jupiter will be retrograde. And so as Jupiter is retrograde, that's when we take Jupiter's blessings and prepare for them internally. When Jupiter, so Jupiter, as we know, is a planet of blessings and expansion and luck and things like that, was what we normally hear. And when Jupiter goes retrograde, sometimes it can feel like, that ease and that luck might have lost us for a little bit. But what usually the lesson around that is, Jupiter can open the door, but if we're not prepared for opportunity, we may or may not truly fully benefit from it. So I see Jupiter retrograde times as preparing for the blessings of Jupiter, and so we can have a repeat here of this magical trine, this flowing, energetic sort of cauldron of energy. Remember, we have the occult of Scorpio. We have the freedom of Jupiter. We've got the magic of Neptune and Pisces and that healing ability, you know, and how do we create magic from that in our own lives? And so let's see. We'll just go real quick. The 16th degree of Scorpio is, oh wait, 16. Okay, so it's, yeah, 16 Scorpio, so it's the 17th degree. A woman fecunded by her own spirit is great with child. And it says the keynote, a total reliance upon the dictates of the gods within. And so there's something about this transpersonal way of existence. The human person becomes a mother of the living God, right? So birthing the divine manifestations of the divine. Again, letting that spirit live through you. If you think of the soul, not necessarily as outside of yourself, but having its own sort of DNA imprint of what it wants to express through you in the world. And your job is simply to get out of the way. Your job is to not let others, people's judgments and excuses and these blocks and everything be in the way of what you're meant to express in the world through soul. You know, I think that is the ultimate expression of individuation. And that is what this Jupiter can help us do, is just to sort of get out of our own way, not looking for immediate return on, you know, our magic, our specialness, but actually just letting soul flow through us and live through us. And so it's interesting that we'd be full of grace, you know, it's like Mary full of grace. That's sort of, you know, the message of this. And then when we have, let's see, Neptune at the 17th degree of Pisces, telling us, oh, that's an Easter parade. You know, we'd had that, I think last year. And so it's participation in collective peak experiences. The capacity inherent in all great social cultural images to unite the members of a community in a display of excellence. Right? So here we have yet again some kind of greatness of the collective. You know, how is being filled with grace, filled with your own grace and soul purpose, helping to create beauty and magic and change, much needed change in the world. And then the last of the trines we'll have next year, August 16th at the 15th degree of these signs. So let's see, let's look at at 15 degrees. So that's the 16th degree. So Neptune in Pisces will be in the quiet of his study. A creative individual experiences a flow of inspiration. The keynote is reliance upon one's inner source of inspiration or guidance, finding one's own subjective strength. Right? So, and that's interesting because this is Neptune in Pisces, and the flow of inspiration, allowing that total flow of inspiration to come through. And this is actually just about 5 days after the solar eclipse, you know, this coming August. And so that can be a really major time. Again, you know, we saw the major changes that have happened since this last eclipse last year, that great American eclipse. And here again, you know, this summer we'll have 3 eclipses in a row, the last one being August 11th. And then we'll have this Jupiter trine Neptune, which is saying, you know, allow just the quietness of one's study, right? Being in meditation or in ritual or in prayer, and then just allowing yourself to be guided and to even just float away with the inspiration. I think that's a beautiful image. And then we have Scorpio at the 16th degree. And let's see what Scorpio has to say. Yes, so a girl's face breaking into a smile. That's interesting. The fervent reaching out on the part of the young of heart to new experiences, a glowing warmth of feeling. So when we think about, that innocence, that ability to, it's interesting because the Sabian Symbols says a girl's face breaking into a smile. So going from maybe not being so happy, maybe not experiencing joy in 1 minute, and then breaking out into that joyousness, and so both of these Sabian symbols have something to do with joy and inspiration, and maybe sudden insights, sudden magic. And again, this is during that eclipse season so that is August 11th. So when we think about these opportunities with Jupiter and Scorpio, not letting ourselves get too depressed, with all the darkness that's coming out, because it can lead to more healing. I mean, look already about what's happening with the compassion of one another, of being able to witness another's pain and then being able to say no more. That's that fixed energy of Scorpio, of saying, maybe I was abused as a child, as a young woman, I was treated like prey. No more going forward. No more of letting this continue to happen in our society. And that can be a really beautiful thing. And so trining as Jupiter and Scorpio, this dark truth, this darkness that just keeps coming at us, the Neptune can help to, again, anesthetize some of the pain and help to bring it to a place where we can let that water, those healing waters flow. But we also do want to look at just keeping an eye on the greater collective. I know that Stephen Forrest had said that Jupiter and Scorpio in the past, there have been things like plagues. And now we are seeing these black plagues, right, in Africa that may be spreading. There could be some things like that when we talk about a trine with Neptune, which things will spread. There will be no, stopping it. And so we want to, sort of maybe be mentally and emotionally prepared for things really taking off. They can take off in ways that are beautiful, and they can take off in ways that can really make us fearful, really make us, looking for answers, looking for the why. And so just looking in our own lives, where can we not get caught up in the riptides, right? We want to always remain conscious of where we're allowing ourselves to flow, and then where can we continually tap into, we may think we're tapped out on compassion. We may think we're even monetarily tapped out on donating to this and that and the other thing. We may find that there's more to do in those areas. There's more to give. And we may just find a way, to be the part of the collective where we know we belong and where we know we want to help the healing of the world, right? Because ultimately, this is about freedom, our freedom to choose, our freedom to be part of the ocean. We are just as much, the wave of the ocean as we are every little single drop. and we're all sort of in this together. And we'll see much more of this about, every little thing that we do will have a ripple effect, and that can be of good. That can be letting spirit live through us, or that can be being overwhelmed, right? That's what Neptune can often do, is overwhelming us. So learning how to surf, right? Learning how to surf these waves, staying with the hope on the other side of the wave. And so I did want to just leave us with one more little insight. Let me see. What came to me was when I just remembered about those dates. About December 2nd and 3rd. December 3rd is when, yes, Mercury stations retrograde. And I believe, yes, it's on a full moon. Oh my God. So December 3rd, as Kaypacha would say, oh my God, right? December 3rd is a full moon in Gemini. And it is also the Jupiter trine Neptune, and it is also the day that Mercury stations retrograde conjunct Saturn and Sagittarius. So, I mean, there's a lot there about, what we believe. What makes our lives are what we believe. And it's funny because, I'll maybe go to an astrology conference and there's people there that, I just admire and respect, and, and we're like a tribe and everything's like wonderful and great. And then you might, in the same conference center, walk into a different ballroom with a bunch of like accountants and things that think, oh, you're part of that astrology conference? You must be a nut. You know what I'm saying? I mean, our beliefs and our judgments, they create our world. If you're here in the new paradigm community, you already are willing to look beyond the surface of life. And this is what we want to continue to do, looking for the truth, finding our belief systems, and actually staying with that belief system that supports the cycle of life, that supports the healing of the soul. Because there's so much out there that people are plugging into. Right now, it's almost like everyone is plugging into some kind of belief, whether that belief be in, these terrorist organizations we're seeing, whether that belief being in, religion, thinking that like some religious figure is going to come and save us, or that belief being in, just the faith in the universe, knowing that we're in a cycle and this too shall pass, and this too has the capacity to help us grow. As Rick Levine said in his recent article for the Mountain Astrologer about 2018, he said, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Right? So Jupiter here is the planet of growth, of an opportunity for growth, and then when it's trining Neptune, that opportunity can be limitless. It's about limitless potential, limitless growth in the realm of spirit, of intuition, of destiny, of the soul, and magic. It's creating our own magic in the world. So in some ways, we're going to be questioning our world. We're going to be wanting to solidify our beliefs. But, as Saturn moves into Capricorn from Sagittarius, all these beliefs that we've been saying we want, all of this that we've been saying we want as change in our world, Saturn in Capricorn is going to say, okay, this is where the rubber hits the road. But we fortunately can cling on to the best of those beliefs and still have faith if we allow the magic of Jupiter and Neptune to really keep us elevated into the area of evolution and soul healing. Well, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening to my little monologue on this magical transit of Jupiter through Scorpio, trining Neptune in Pisces. Please feel free to ask me some questions either here or in the Facebook group. I'd be happy to just sort of chat with you. You know, I'm figuring this out too. We're all sort of in this soup together. I'd love to hear your thoughts, maybe how this is aspecting your chart, and what sort of magic you'd like to bring over this coming year as we're all just falling down the rabbit hole together, right? Thank you so much, and I will see you in the New Paradigm community.